Hey, it's your buddy Peace and Harmony with you here today. We are focusing in on a viewer question that we got in, and that is to further dive into the love bombing stage of a psychopathic individual and how this really sets up in place. How does this really occur? How can they figure this out, sort this out, so that this no longer happens to them again? So it's very important to understand a little bit of the neurobiology of the psychopathic individual. A psychopath has brain regions which do not wire and fire the way that a quote-unquote normal or healthy individual will wire and fire together. So their personality character disorder is basically, the foundation is in this this brain scan area, or in the neurobiology area, the regions of the brain. And the regions of the brain of a psychopathic individual are found in studies to be hypersensitive to the neurochemical called dopamine. Dopamine is a chemical which gives you a feeling of reward or satisfaction or immediate gratification. And so when you do something that is gratifying, that is rewarding, for example, the sexual orgasmic response, or the feeling of being in love, there's a lot of neurochemicals going on and that are releasing and wiring and firing, including dopamine, including the love hormones, oxytocin, the adrenaline. A lot of these provide very pleasurable surges of feelings and emotions, which are triggered really by the neural centers in the brain. And neuroscience has told us that the brains of psychopaths are hypersensitive to the reward chemical dopamine. So when they are in a pleasure-seeking mode, they are hyper-aroused. So they are also thought to have a deficit of testosterone, as well as other inhibitory chemicals that create really the feeling of empathy, or the feeling of what we call a conscience. And a conscience is a state of right or wrong. It's a state of knowing what is good or bad. It is a state of knowing what is respect or disrespect. It is an awareness of what a social norm is, and what a social norm is not. So your social conscience keeps a very firm boundary, and it keeps a very firm stop mechanism. So in other words, you're not going to go up to somebody and slap their face. There's a lot of consequences that would go with that. It would perhaps land you in jail. It would perhaps cause you to be arrested. Certain things that you know not to do, because it would be breaking the law, breaking a social norm. There are certain protocols. And the psychopath, because of their empathy deficit, they are not aware of, attending to, or able to understand much of these social norms. They understand it cognitively, but because of their heightened sense of self-importance, this heightened dopamine response, coupled with low testosterone, and are oftentimes a amygdala that is very inactive, which causes them to not see the warning signs or not attend to it, causes them to pursue their goals with a very cold, callous, and hot-tempered reaction, almost like a hyper-aggressiveness. So we see this in the violent psychopathic criminals. We see this in the everyday corporate criminals, those individuals who take advantage of masses of people and do not feel a tinge of remorse, guilt, or any sort of feeling for them, that they really don't care. Their greed, you've heard of corporate greed. In other words, they don't care if they're toxifying people. They don't care if they're causing emotional damage, physical damage, financial ruin to people. They are very much involved in only their self-interest. They're not involved in the self-interest of the masses. So this is what we call a lack of conscience, a lack of integrity, a lack of empathy. And this is responsible in the love bombing phase, when we get right back to it. The love bombing phase is when this individual, because of their heightened sense of self-importance, coupled with a lack of empathy and a lack of conscience, they're able to not engage in a lot of fear or anxiety responses that normally people would feel anxious of, fearful of. if they were to be violating someone sexually. Most people would say, that's wrong, I'm not going there, I'm not doing that. The psychopath doesn't have that voice. They don't have that physical brake. There's no brakes on the car, if you will. They feel it. Because of this, they see how they are over to charm and overwhelm people when they're able to cross the line. They realize that people usually are literally like a deer in headlights. They are fascinated by this individual. They are really like a deer in headlights. They are stopped in their tracks by this individual because they're such a smooth talker. Because they don't show a fear response when most people would show a fear response. They don't show a anxiety response when most people would have an anxiety response. So people subconsciously then become fascinated by this individual because of their charm, because they're smooth talking, because of the physical prowess with which they exhibit, the way that they will exude an air of confidence, a certain charisma, a certain je ne sais quoi, something you can't quite put your fingers on. The psychopath will manipulate not only with their body, but the way that they put words together. They have realized that certain words will trigger people, certain ways that they string words together. And the psychopath will do this very much only like an actor. It is not something that they feel or is genuinely emanating from them, genuinely coming from their hearts. They do things in a sort of mimicry. Mimicry meaning that they are only able to mimic or play back what they see real, healthy, truly loving people do. So if they see a truly loving person, the way that they will, for example, the way a person is very humane and is maybe taking care of hurt animals, and they see the way that this person will pet this animal, and they'll see their body language, and they'll see their eyes, the way that they look at this little pet, and they'll see the way that they take care of them and nurture them and see where they've been abused and then clean them up and take care of them. So they'll observe people in that very same manner. And that's why you see this psychopathic stare. When they see that they're just kind of looking, it's like they're registering exactly what this person is feeling, wanting, and they're able to then absorb this and basically mimic it. So they are actors 24/7. Because of their lack of consciousness and because they are lack of conscience, they are able to really exhibit this sort of actor persona 24/7. They can act like a doctor. They can act like a lover. They can tell people things that they want to hear. They can be, priests and not really feel the true divinity of God. They can really they can be teachers and not really care about educating people. They just don't care. They're trying to get something. They're very parasitic in this. So in the love bombing stage, when they overwhelm people with this charm and this transfix attention on them, that's how they know that they're basically then got them under their control. And then they will break people down by crossing your boundaries. So eventually, in the love bombing stage, there's always going to be a boundary violation. A boundary violation of time, a boundary violation of your attention and your focus, a boundary violation in your sense of identity. They're going to then replace that with what they want, what they are programming you, and what they are conditioning you with. And that is to be thinking about them 24/7. So if they can constantly be in your mind's eye, if they can constantly be in your thought, if they can have you constantly texting them, photographing them, making dates with them, thinking about them all the time, even when you're supposed to be focusing on something else, then they have broken you down and they're making you then very exhausted and then open to suggestion. And open to suggestion, which means implanting certain commands that they want you to then basically what I call fatten up the goose, or how they want you to proceed. So they'll give you commands like, what do you're wearing this, or you're doing this, or they'll kind of give you commands or instructions of how to be, do, dress. They'll make you violate your sexual boundaries. So they'll want to hyper arouse you, tell you certain stories. When you're out, they'll be looking at certain people and make you feel paranoid. Create a sort of hypervigilance that they are doing things behind your back. There's certain things that they comment on in the way that they look. And in their speech pattern, they'll have a way of stringing together certain meanings that eventually will not only begin to hyper arouse you, but then create a hyper fear and a sort of terror. And they do this through an isolated and very idiosyncratic and what I would call a very sort of covert or cryptic meaning, which means the meaning is specifically originated within the manipulative individual. So they will surround you with cryptic meanings. And if you've been brainwashed by a psychopath, you know particularly what I'm talking about. And this is very scary. This is very terrifying. And this is not something that everybody understands or gets. So that's why I'm creating the channel here, is to help people who have been in that brainwashed, terrorized state where you're feeling like at the mercy of this individual and this sort of environment of hypervigilance and being brainwashed and being putting these commands that you are to be a certain way for them, look a certain way, make yourself sexually available for them, mentally open to their suggestions, where they've basically fed their target a plethora of lies, and then perhaps even engaged in double or triple lies. So they're doing this with a number of different people, and then you have now exposed them. The love bombing, that is how it occurs. It is when they have you charmed, when you're basically looking at them with no filter, when you have belayed your trust to them and allowed them to furthermore give your sense of self or self-worth is based then on them. So this occurs in the beginning. And so if you kind of look back and reflect back on the relationship, your self-worth was based on them. Your emotional well-being was based on them and not originated and exercised within yourself. So oftentimes that is how they target. That is how they brainwash. That is how they gaslight, is they then kind of pull the strings in your life rather than you pulling the strings in your own life. So that's why I talk about how important it is to unplug, how important it is to rehumanize yourself, get into your affirmations of yourself and being conditioned by your true future, your own internal input, and not the input of the psychopath. Because they will have you living on almost feeling like you have lost a sense of reality or lost a sense of being humanized, and what is basically felt to be almost a dissociation or depersonalization, where you feel like you no longer know what's up. Up is up, down is down. You have a distorted feeling of reality, and that's very, very scary. And those people who have been prisoners of war have been in a similar situation. And oftentimes the result then after the love bombing is the feeling of complete and utter exhaustion, depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress syndrome, complex PTSD, where you feel very frightened to leave the house, frightened that people don't understand you, that you can't speak. And that's why it's so important to get your own inner voice back, your own real you, and being surrounded by people who are empathic and who are nice and who are comforting. And even if you need to be in a receive state for a while before you interact, it's very important for you to engage in that very humanizing, very comforting exercises, activities, and situations. So when I talk about, looking back at the love bombing, look at when your boundaries were violated. Now it's important for you to erect those boundaries and enforce them. Look at your self-worth and take your self-worth back into your hands and not at the hands of this individual, because that's how they manipulate. They override your own psychology. It's like a psychological warfare where they have charmed you and really sort of taken over your mind, if you will. And they do this in a very deliberate and calculating manner. So in the love bombing, they're seeing exactly what you will fall for. They will see exactly how much you will give them of your time. How much are you texting back? How much are you emailing back? What are the photographs? How can they distract you? You're supposed to be focusing on your work or your kids or your fitness or your health. And you find that you are now constantly thinking about them, or constantly hearing their stories or feeling sorry for them. And you are now in a state of hyperarousal, where you're then hanging on the words of the psychopath rather than having your own mindset, your own perception, your own sense of humanity, and you're not being mirrored back in a truly healthy manner. And so slowly your self-worth begins to deplete. And I call it your emotional bank account is being depleted. You're really losing this sense of groundedness and reality. So that's why it's so important when you're emerging from this, to realize that that's how the love bombing takes place. It's okay not to want to go back to the love bombing stage. Oftentimes there's an addiction from the individual who has been love bombed. There's an addiction to being with them. There is a desire to go back and regress into the illusion. There's a desire and an addiction to go back to the lies. And so it's realizing you have to come to the state where you then admit to yourself that you had made a mistake by believing in this narcissistic or psychopathic individual and the lies. You had made a grave mistake by entrusting and perhaps sacrificing your family or your children or your finances over to them and their parasitic ways. And that you had made an error, and unbeknownst to you, in your unknowing, unconsciously, you had made a mistake, and now your life is someplace where it's not functioning for you. So, and it's really kind of owning up and like removing that denial. And when you can take responsibility for yourself and your own emotional well-being 100%, and making a commitment to yourself to take responsibility for your emotional well-being, your stability, your vision of your life moving forward, and really do that in a very strong, firm, and committed way. Not just, I think I should be responsible, but I am responsible. Not think I probably should make a change. I am making a change, and I'm making that change now. Enough is enough. So once you are able to make those statements and stop enabling yourself and keeping yourself stuck in that funk, keeping yourself stuck in that self-doubt, which the psychopath or narcissist wants you to keep in that phase, so they can basically hover you back in. It's saying no. It's saying, I'm not going there. My life is moving forward. I am moving on, and I'm moving on without guilt, without fear, and without obligation, and I'm moving on in gratitude. And furthermore, I'm embracing myself. And I thank God that I'm able to own up to the reality and see the illusion for what it was. And I'm now able to really take excitement for my life moving forward, and really look with excitement and enthusiasm at my prospects of feeling good, of smiling again, of feeling free, liberated, and surrounding myself with people who really truly have empathy, appreciate me for who I am, value me for the real me, and furthermore, my life will expand and grow to encompass so much that I had only dreamed. And those dreams become your reality, and then you're back to living your life that you had originally wanted with a manipulative individual. Instead, you're now living it on your terms, with true terms, with an individual who really gets you, understands you, and loves you for the person that you are. Peace and harmony with you here today. I hope these videos do help. Please share and please subscribe for more great tools, videos, discussion, and support.